Welcome to Greek 1. This is lesson 13. Today we're talking about demonstrative pronouns. And we're going to actually jump right into the lesson here. We've got another quick one, and we're near the end. If you're going through this course, you're almost there. We got one more, and then we're going to take a break. And then when you're ready, it's Greek 2. So congratulations, you're at the tail end here. Okay, we are talking about English demonstratives. What is an English demonstrative pronoun? This, these, and that, and those. So essentially, it's when you point at something and you're trying to say, no, it's these ones that are near. You're demonstrating, right? You're pointing. Okay, it's these ones. Or it's this one if it's singular. So that's the difference between this and these. This, there's one thing here I want you to see. It's this one. If it's more than one, then it's these. It's these two, these three, these five, these 100, these here. Now, if it's off in the distance, then you would say it's that one or it's those. Now, it could be people. It's that man. It could be those things, whatever it is. This versus that, these versus those. Greek has the exact same thing. In Greek, it is utos, which is this, and ekinos versus that. I briefly mentioned this, that you want to, because this shows up in your vocabulary, I would recommend you learn these as a pair. You learn both these paradigms, and when you say them out loud, you're using your finger. And I think using your body and moving around is really important to just getting this stuff in your brain. And just kind of imagine you're pointing to something. You're pointing something out for somebody, right? And so when I practice these, when I learn these, and when I teach them, I always have, my pointing finger ready to rock. And if I'm working through this vocabulary, then I'll pretend I'm pointing something out to somebody. And I'll say utos, and I'm pointing down by my feet, right? And then I'll point out and say ekinos. So it's these utos, and then point out and ekinos, that or those. And that's how I memorize them. Just utos ekinos. And you could probably nail that down in like 5 minutes. It's not that complicated. And then when you're with your finger in your head, if you're looking at the word and you say utos, and you're going to know exactly what that is. So let's look at the paradigms. First, you have utos, and utos can be a little tricky. And we'll get into that. But honestly, if you have your endings memorized, you're going to be able to parse it. If you have your endings memorized, you're going to be able to parse this. You have a rough breathing mark for the nominative singular masculine, the nominative singular feminine. So it's just utos avti. Same thing in the nominative plural masculine, nominative plural feminine. You've got that rough breathing mark and the vowels, right? Uti and avte. Okay, other than that, if you look at all the other forms, they start off with a tav. So you've got on the masculine side tutu, tuto, tuton, and then skipping nominative plural, tuton, tutis, tutus. And so the quick and easy way to identify utos is that tav. Most of the time you're going to have this tav, and that's going to make it easy. Or if you have the rough breathing mark. So you're either going to start off with the rough breathing mark. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. I've got a big screen. It's kind of hard to read. But this is a rough breathing mark. Now, let me bring up avtos. a lot of times people get these confused when they're not that similar. Now, if you look at avtos is the pronoun he, she, or it. We did that, I think, in the last lesson or the one before that. So a quick glance, you're like, oh, okay, these are really similar, but they're not. Notice that utos has the tav and avtos doesn't. None of these have the tav to start it off. But you can notice the difference. Utos has a rough breathing mark at the beginning, and avtos has a soft breathing mark. So what ends up happening is you really only have two places where you could get really confused, and that is the feminine nominative singulars and plural. Notice that they're both spelled the same except for the breathing mark. And so I could see that being a little confusing. But really, all you have to remember is that if you have a tav or a rough breathing mark, that is this. If it's a soft breathing mark and it doesn't have a tav, then it is he, she, or it. And it's a little bit easier to see the difference. So on the left hand, you have the demonstrative this, and on the right hand, you have the pronoun he, she, or it. And even though in a couple of places it looks really similar, they are spelled different. So avtos obviously starts off, they all start out with an alpha. Utos has either the breathing mark or the tav, and that's how you tell the difference. So maybe looking at this chart and kind of just looking where you might get caught up. Honestly, it's not that difficult. I think you'll be all right. I'm just pointing out, if you're gonna have any problems, this is where it's gonna be. But anyway, that is how you say this in Greek. Now, how do you say that in Greek? That one over there, that is ekinos. Ekinos. And the chart is, again, even easier. Obviously, you haven't learned any words that sound like ekinos, and the endings are exactly what you would expect. You've already learned the case endings. We've gone over them a million times. You learned the case endings, and you learn what they look on nouns. You've seen them at the end of tu. You've seen them at the end of adjectives, at the end of the article. So by now you're pretty familiar, and you can see this is the exact same pattern we've been learning. There's no third declension here, so this is just straight 2-1-2. And you should be not surprised at all. So it's just ekinos with the normal endings, and I don't think there'll be any confusion. Obviously, they have case. So if it's in the genitive, it would be of this one or this one's. If it's plural, it would be these or of these. If it's dative, it would be to this one or to these. If it's accusative, then it's going to be the direct object. He sent these ones, or these cars. That's how that would work. So I think that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to give you one translation example, or just discuss one quick translation thing, and then we're done. Again, a pretty short lesson here. How do you translate the demonstrative? Well, the one thing you got to know is that it could be two options. It can either be a pronoun, and if it's a pronoun, then it's not modifying something else. It's just standing on its own. So take this Greek sentence, this is a sentence. Pos estin tuto. Pos estin tuto. All right. Pos means how. Estin, you should know by now, means he, she, or it. And tuto means this, right? So in this case, it's not modifying something else. It's not like tuto anthropon or something like that. It's not modifying another noun. It's just standing by itself. So this is going to be, how is this? Like, how is this possible? Okay. The other option is that the demonstrative could be an adjective. So this is where it is describing something else. It's not standing by itself. So take the Greek phrase ek tu kosmou touto. Sorry, toutou. Ek tu kosmou toutou. All right. So in this case, toutou is not standing by itself. If it was standing by itself, then you could translate this like out of the world, this. That doesn't make any sense. It's not standing by itself. It's clearly modifying. It's connected to kosmou. It's saying this world, right? So it's not out of the world this, it's out of this world. So the only thing that you gotta kind of think about, and honestly, if this doesn't make any sense, when you're translating, it should be pretty obvious. If there's something there to modify, then it's gonna modify it. If there's nothing there for a modify, it's gonna stand by itself. So it's either a pronoun, how is this, right? Just the word this by itself, or it could be ekinos, how is that? Or it could be an adjective where it's modifying this world. So it'd be ek tu kosmou toutou. Or it could be ekinos, ek tu kosmou ekinou. How is out of that world, I suppose it could be. And it would be modifying that world. And that's it. It's either a pronoun or adjective. There really isn't much more to say. Just for the sake of being thorough, I'm going to review. In this lesson, we talked about two things. They're the demonstrative pronouns in Greek. Outos means this. Ekinos means that. We said ekinos is pretty easy. You don't have any words. You can get that confused. The endings are all really straightforward. Again, if it's genitive, you would say of that. Or if it's dative, you would say to that. Of course, plurals, same thing. Of these, of those, to these, to those. And then outos, we said you could get hung up a little bit on the fact that it looks similar to the word avtos, especially if you're looking at that nominative singular feminine or the nominative plural feminine. They have the exact same spelling, except for the rough breathing mark. Outos, the demonstrative pronoun for this, right, has a rough breathing mark. Or it's going to have the tav. So that tav really is a dead giveaway for most of the chart. The only time you might get hung up are on the nominative plurals and singulars, where it just has that rough breathing mark. If you forget it has a rough breathing mark versus the avtos, you might get those confused. But again, the masculines have that u at the beginning instead of avtos, it's outos. And then for the feminine, which granted it has the same letters, right? It's avti, and it actually sounds the same thing, right? Avti, avte. The difference there is the rough breathing mark. And I honestly don't expect this to be an issue. I think you're going to be okay. If you have the workbook and you go through that once, I think you're going to be fine. Well, guys, we're almost to the end of Greek 1. I hope you're staying encouraged. I hope, realistically, this is probably a little fuzzy. Maybe not this lesson on demonstratives, but I'm sure there are areas where you're just a little confused. That's okay. As you go on, things will click. Months later, you'll think about something, it'll just click, or if you're studying with a partner, just one day it'll just make sense. Just keep reviewing the lessons, and I wish that you keep going. I think there's a huge blessing in picking up your Greek Bible and making sense of it, and you're getting close. All right, until next time, God bless.